Welcome to Beyond the Headlines. Contributors Leslie Miller and Mandel Miller.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you both very much. It's good to have you here. Good evening to both of you. And so let's just jump right in and discuss. A lot to discuss. I know, and I tell you, the Prime Minister looked pretty heated there. I see him wiping his face even. It's some little, hot times. But I want to know, Leslie, I'll ask you first. Your thoughts about what the explanation is. Yeah, we know it's the trusses. It's not the full roof. But people are saying, however you break that down and make it very technical, what happened?
The trusses is really dealt with the initial stage of the roof. You put on your 2x6, you put on your 2x8, etc. to get your forms from one end of the building to the next. That's what you do when you start a roof. You got to bear in mind that Mr. Roker is a first-class construction man. He's been in the business for over 50 years. He's not a rookie. He has worked under the F&M administration as well as the PLP administration. He's not new to the construction industry. And he has a good team working with him. It is unfortunate that would have happened the way it did. The span from one end of the building from east to west is so long that if one mistake is made in the center or anywhere near that center, and you don't have sufficient uprights, the trusses up, it's going to collapse in the center because the weight follows each section and heads for the middle. That is probably what took place.
But how expensive an oversight is
all
that?
All of the screws and the nails that you would put in, all that comes down on the ground. You have to pick it up. You have to take the nails out. You have to go back and redo the job. It's probably going to cost him an extra $10,000, maybe $15,000 in labor and manpower. Not much in materials because materials are already on site. And we just have to do some adjustment with the materials. So it's not a waste of materials. It's just the manpower to re-erect what has been already put up. Bear in mind too, I think the Prime Minister got a little angry when you questioned the man's integrity as far as him having an oral contract. Well, first of all, the Ministry of Works does repairs every year in collaboration with the Ministry of Education. So they will have a scope out of all the schools and they'll have a price for each one of the works to be done. So they'll have that scope of work there. It was awarded to Mr. Roker because he does it every summer for both administrations. And they will tell him, listen, time is running out, go on, start the job, we're going to get to the formal contract. Needed. That's normal. And everybody knows that. So there's no dispute about giving a verbal contract and having the I's and dots catered to a few days, in fact, maybe a week or two later. That's a formal document. That's a normal thing. But he is a very qualified man, and he's astute in his work. Just one of those things that happen. Some people are saying it might have been sabotage because there's a lot of other workers on that job that has smaller jobs to do. And his was the major one. So you never know what could happen. But that's
or just people not, again, just oversight, sloppiness. I mean, and a very costly one at that.
But it's his expense, and he's going to take care of it, as he indicated to the public.
We heard him.
It's on him. So
Mandel, do we buy that? We're happy, of course, the gentleman, as you heard Leslie say, and the Prime Minister, and the gentleman himself, a veteran in this business. He's not a novice to construction,
by no means.
And certainly have constructed many schools and repairs, etc. All that for quite a number of years. And mistakes do happen, oversights happen. After all, they're all only human. But again, as you heard Leslie say, it's going to be delay perhaps that deadline and additional money.
At least a week.
Shenique, again, good afternoon, Bahamas. And like I would have said to you earlier about this the same story, that I happen to know Mr. Roker personally and know that he has been a very long-standing contractor in the country, particularly with education works for a number of years. I've known him, like he would have alluded to, working under both administrations, providing back-to-school repairs. I don't think the issue in this case for me, personally, is Mr. Roker or the contractor. I think the issue that's at hand is when you take into consideration the memory of the Bamsey Dome. when our Prime Minister today was the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Works then, and the issue we had of whether it had insurance or didn't have insurance, I think looking back at that issue in particular, one would naturally expect that our sitting Prime Minister, having had that prior experience, would be more frugal in the execution of the works or his duties or in the course of his governance in terms of how they go about executing things. Now, I hear what Mr. Miller said about, the time being of the essence and us having to execute it in this manner in order to timely meet the opening of school maybe. Now, whether or not the average Bahamian is aware that oral contracts is something that happens, I don't think the average Bahamian knows that. And I believe that now that persons like Mr. Miller, who have served, who was a former cabinet minister, can say to us and the Prime Minister that these things are normal. It enlightens us as a people a lot more as to, how we go about doing business in the Bahamas, because in a lot of instances when the average Bahamian is trying to get a contract, whether it be for $1,200 versus $1.2 million, there's so many difficulties. And so hearing our Prime Minister and others allude to the oral contract and even seem so lackadaisical in their communication about it, I think that's the part that's troubling to people.
It's something that's just done. Now, I'll tell you, I understand your point, and I also understand this, so I'll start here. Because this gentleman obviously has a relationship where, and he's in a pool, where he has said, listen, back to school time and repairs, you are approved and already sanctioned by the government, meaning the government, any which government. They know him, they go to him, he gets the work done. All of that stuff is taken care of at the back end. And so I quite get that. But also, as you were saying, there are people who figure they can't get an oral contract. And so they're wondering exactly how that happens. Leslie, I see you're trying to itch to get a
word in.
What's
the protocol
and so,
for it?
So go ahead.
Bear in mind now, you indicated that the job was 1.2 million. I haven't seen that. It's not been stated
I
officially,
wasn't saying
but
that job in particular was 1.2 million. But
talk about these amounts.
I'm alluding to the fact that in this case, here you have a project that is valued to the tune of millions of dollars.
No, it's not.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars then, because I'm not an appraiser. So hundreds of thousands of dollars that is able to, that you're able to produce this verbal contract.
A word of mouth.
And then as I listen as a young Bahamian to the Prime Minister, when he said and then you reduce it to putting it in writing, so it almost seems as if the verbal contract carries more weight than when they reduce it to writing.
No.
And so I think it's these kinds of communications and these kinds of instances, these unorthodox things that seem to be puzzling to the average Bahamian.
The responsibility of the men and women who work at the Ministry of Works is to assess all of the contracts that government is giving out. They go and they look at a school, they look at a building, and they say this is what it's going to cost. Okay, so they already have that in-house, what it's going to cost per square foot to put up a building. They're going to know in-house what it costs a square foot to do repairs, which is much more expensive than putting up a new building, by the way. Okay, so they would have had those figures. He'd have been one of those persons on the list that was approved to do work. So they would have given it work. Now, a point that you made, you said that the Prime Minister, from his experience with BAMSI, should have known better or should have done something else. It is not the job of the Prime Minister to see to it that everyone who gets a government contract has insurance. It is the responsibility of the officer in charge of the project to see to it, if it was warranted, that insurance should have been in place. That is, I was the minister. That's not responsible to the minister. That's what you have people working there for, who are qualified to ensure, and who was there when BAMSI's situation take place. That is their responsibility to ensure that public funds are spent properly, and that all of the insurance and other things that needs to be in place was in place.
And Mr. Miller,
that is their job.
I believe that the average Bahamian understands that mistakes, incidents happen on a daily basis. The roof collapsing, I don't think is
it wasn't the roof, the truss.
The truss, the roof,
yes.
And in Bahamian colloquial, in Bahamian dialect terms, we just call cookies crackers and crackers cookies and biscuit and all that.
Yes.
In Bahamian terms, that's a roof. That's a roof in Bahamian term. In Webster's dictionary definition,
it's less than 40% of the cost of a roof. Let's get that straight. Less than 40%.
When you look up
The
in the
point,
ceiling,
whatever that was on the top, that is the thing that collapsed and caved in.
exactly. And so the
But
average
we look at
Bahamian,
that
I
when
believe,
you finish the roof.
the average
You look at
Bahamian, I
that.
believe, is concerned about the manner in which we are now learning that these kinds of projects are executed under. When Mr. Miller, imagine the other day when you were talking about the beautification and the different works that you were doing. Imagine the average young man who is unemployed but got a lawnmower but do not have the administrative competencies to go and write a contract. Now he's understanding that he could possibly have a verbal conversation from the prime minister come down or his member of parliament that could possibly assist them. What I'm saying is that the average Bahamian did not understand or do not understand that these things happen on a normal basis in terms of how these contracts are executed.
You would be surprised.
You can discuss this over coffee and have a verbal agreement. That's what you're saying, Mandel.
That's basically, and then when you hear the prime minister say, when it's reduced to writing, it's as if the writing aspect or the written aspect of the contract is of less value than the word amount.
Because the price is already embedded in the discussion. They know what it's going to cost to complete that project.
Mr. Miller,
I think what Mandel is talking about, Leslie, is the fact that the job, the job and the opportunity was basically given to the gentleman.
Who doing the cleaning? Like say the airport causeway.
But don't know how to go and ask.
Their MP would have given them a contract verbally. Say, listen, man, this is your corridor for you to do. You got to pick up the contract from the Department of Beach and Parks in another week, and they would start their work. That's how it's done. Because the process is slow with the administration of these contracts.
Well, in this instance,
I do believe, I'll tell you this,
that's what happened.
While I am not in education or in works, I do believe, based on the fact that there's a pool of people, contractors, who each year take care of school repairs or building of schools, etc. That gentleman was obviously someone known to both administrations, and say, hey, this is what we need. Can you take care of that? Get it done. And as the Prime Minister said, follow up with a contract.
Shenique, I always tell people, here in our country, we have this tuck shop way of operating.
We do.
But we want but we got a supermarket objective, but we run it like a tuck shop. The point that I'm trying to make is that I believe that just before that incident happened, the Prime Minister and a team would have had the opportunity to inspect that location or that site. God forbid something had happened.
Why would the Prime Minister and his team inspect the site? That's the job of the Ministry of Works.
I think they were doing
That's
school.
The Ministry of Works.
No, I'm saying that I believe that they were doing the school tour at the time, something that we do every year with ministers and the Prime Minister going to tour schools and say that we're getting ready to get back to school. I believe they had just done that at R.M. Bailey when that incident happened. The point that I'm trying to raise, is where do we, as the Bahamian people, who do we turn to for in liability cases had that roof fell and hurt our Prime Minister? Who do we turn to and say that the liability is on? If there's no written contract and just an oral something, we don't understand these things as a people. And so the problem we have in this country as Bahamians is that we find out after the fact and we're not included in the decision-making process, because nobody said to us prior to this incident that these kinds of contracts are able to be executed. Mr. Miller, again, it happens but unbeknownst to the Bahamian public.
You said the Bahamian public.
Or to the average person.
Yes, fine.
The majority of the people.
They represent the people. The members of Parliament represent the people. That's what you elect them for.
Well, boy, I encourage every Bahamian under the sound of Mr. Miller and my voice to start to voice your concerns to your members of Parliament in terms of what you need.
That's what they should do.
Stake an oral contract.
Well, it doesn't matter. A contract is a contract.
Well, there's a contract with the Bahamian people that I believe is.
Get
You have a contract with them.
get your oil contract. Get
That's
your
a 5-year contract.
Get
and
your
if
oil
you don't live up
contract.
to the norms of the contract, they will send you home.
Exactly.
and with that said, go after your oil
Yeah.
contract. Meantime, when we come back, though, I'll tell you this:
I can send home.
another hot button issue. This time in education, you all know, you all have been paying attention. It really started as a discussion on this show, not making us some, not at all.
Well, the
stating.
lady started it.
Wait, no.
The unions started. When she going to New York, don't forget that.
We are back after this.
Okay, that's when it started. Blame her.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines, brought to you by Alive. On also the tour with the Prime Minister, of course, Education Minister Glenna Santa-Martin accompanied the Prime Minister on the tour. Of course, she herself had to see the state of readiness for schools, and R.M. Bailey School being a very hot topic. You heard it in the first segment. After that, the trusses collapsed. A couple of weeks ago, the Prime Minister, and of course, accompanied by Education Minister as well as Works Minister, obviously had to go to that campus to see the state of the building there and the fact that it's have to be rebuilt and repaired. And so a question was put to Education Minister Glenna Santa-Martin. She spoke out and she was asked about, of course, whether or not transgender education is part of the public school curriculum or whether or not LGBT books were on the list for the new school year. Now, this came, according to Minister Hannah Martin, after a voice note that was sent some weeks ago went viral. And Minister Hannah Martin says it really caused pandemonium and a lot of concerns among parents in particular. Take a listen at this and then we'll discuss.
I saw this thing. You know what's amazing about this? Someone who say they from Grand Bahama, a voice, female voice, said that we're introducing LGBT in the curriculum and that we're sneaking it in and then we can bring the books. Nameless, faceless, anonymous person, voice. Got all Bahamian, not all, many Bahamian people's in a frenzy. We have to query how it is that something like that should incite us to these types of extremes, unverified, unsupported, and untrue. And so I don't know who the president is, but you know, I can't get into their legal actions. But the assertions that are made are untrue. We have a curriculum, and the curriculum is focusing on literacy, numeracy, helping our young people to be articulate, to help them have the grounding in the subject matter. We have a new history text. These are things we celebrate. The distractions and the erroneous distractions are not helpful. They're not helpful. And so I can't comment on the legal action.
Education Minister Hannah Martin speaking about a voice note that it was a few weeks ago. I heard someone sent it to me, and I heard the voice note. And the voice note, in fact, I was surprised because I wondered what was taking place in Grand Bahama. The voice note stated that there are LGBT books and that LGBT education is in the curriculum. Of course, I would pay close attention because I've had several shows on preventing transgender education. A different matter, made no claims. In fact, I stated each time that this is not what the Ministry of Education or the government is doing. So when I heard that voice note, I wondered myself exactly what was taking place in Grand Bahama and if indeed this was true. I left it right there because I didn't think it was true, but it absolutely went viral and it got a lot of people very nervous. Parents all around this country, even including here in New Providence as well, extremely nervous and upset and wondering. So I think it was very commendable for the minister to jump ahead of that and speak out immediately. I wish he would have done so sooner because that voice note went out about 2 weeks ago or perhaps a week and a half ago. But the point is, she came, she spoke it strongly. You heard from the minister herself, no such thing. I'm going to bring in the panel again. Of course, we have Leslie Miller and Mandel Miller here. Gentlemen, I want you to jump in and this minister extremely very stern in her wording and saying that what that voice note said and where this administration stands, and particular her ministry, and the curriculum stands on educating and equipping students, and that's it.
Shenique, I would really like to take this opportunity to commend Minister Glennis Hannah Martin on addressing this issue. And not just addressing this issue in a very direct way, but in a more holistic way about asking the questions about how is it that a voice note can go out and we become in a frenzy as a people. There's this notion that you hear people say all the time, the Bahamian people are very gullible.
Yeah, they are.
And one of the things that I've had to learn since working along with you, Shenique, is validate everything. Just a few weeks ago, I was in Grand Bahama, I believe it was, and in a particular place, they say turkeys were selling for $5. And everybody believed it because they say it's on social media. I walked into this place, I was like, hey, I hear y'all selling, excuse me, sir, we have some sliced bologna and turkey bologna over there on sale and what's not, can we help you to that? And I'm like, no, man, I mean whole turkey. I say, I hear it on social media. They say, sir, and so, as a people,
Gullible, man.
we have to come up with we have to tell ourselves, we have to educate ourselves. The Bible says, study to show yourself approved.
Yep.
You know? So I want to commend the Minister of Education on speaking directly to this issue and even broadening the conversation about the holistic approach to it. And I myself have had the opportunity to speak with her as it relates to our children and the health of our children, being that I'm employed in the Ministry of Health. And one of the things that she's very adamant about beyond LGBTQRS, whichever, these kinds of things that people are saying that our school systems are being flooded with, is the delivery of psychosocial services. Because one of the things she said to me is, Mandel, how is it possible that we could take steps like that if we ain't yet taken the steps to help our children with the mental challenges they're faced with on a daily basis within the school systems? And so again, hats off to Minister Glennis Hannah Martin as it relates to this issue. I must say this has been one of my favorite communications from her in terms of being very direct, like you say, timely. If it was more timely, then we wouldn't have been able to address it in such a broad scope in terms of the amount of people that believed it and ran with it. Because honest to God, I almost was like, before I got to vet it, I had to go and check myself.
But I know better than to run with it. But I was intrigued because I'm like, what, Leslie, is happening and what is happening in Grand Bahama that I missed? That the Ministry of Education slipped under all of us.
And another thing, I think only as a result of this show and this newscast that people are now going to know that this voice note that I haven't heard yet came from Grand Bahama. The average Bahamian probably don't know where it came from. The average person here in Nassau, where most of our school population is, believe that it's someone from here. And 9 times out of 10, we validate these things ourselves. Imagine how much of us then say, that's someone who work in the ministry who say that.
I believe the greatest example of Bahamian gullibility transpired about 15 years ago, if you all may recall. Remember this guy who's worked out life at Key with this family?
Derek Roll
said that they had left him this inheritance. And if you meet me through the street right next door to where I live in Pinedale, this was the street name now, right next to Pinedale.
Pedale.
No, not Pedale, the one before us.
Union Village?
Not Union Village, the one before then. That's where Darrell Miller used to live, right the back of. And the amount of people that flocked through that corner that Friday, I'll never forget. You couldn't go on Wolf Road. And they paid $150 each to get this $10,000 that this guy was going to give them, that this great foreigner who died with life at Key had left for the Bahamian people. You remember that? That's when I realized the gullibility of our people. They like gimmicks. I saw the Honorable Minister on Friday. We had a long discussion. And she expressed to me her concern. And I said, Glennis, this happened because this lady went to New York and came back here spouting about this thing. And then all hell break loose. And then other people pick up on it. She said, Leslie, under my watch that could never happen. And I'll tell you the type of person she is. When she said it'll never happen,
she mean that.
We were in cabin together. And if you see Glennis Hannah make up her mind that she ain't gonna go along with it, only the good Lord could get her to change. This stuff what they're talking about could never happen on her watch. It's just sad that a woman took that point from Grand Bahama, spread it all over the Bahamas, knowing the gullibility of the Bahamian people, and it has caused havoc in the minds of many of the parents in the schools.
But I think
It's unfortunate.
We ought to use this as an opportunity to encourage our populace, the average Bahamian person, to vet things that you
That you
said
got.
there. Ask questions,
That you
man,
got.
before you just
We like
pick up.
bad news.
Before you just pick, so that in itself should speak to our moral fiber as a people in terms of what we hunger after. You know, it's like once it's salacious and it's something that don't sound like sense, it's like we readily believe it. And you give Bahamian facts and they'll tell you, oh no, I think that's the truth.
Look at the headline today. Man charged with sexually abusing 11-year-old girl. Mother charged with performing illegal abortion. One of the newspapers said this was the lady's husband. The other said it was a boyfriend.
Yeah.
Who the hell is it?
I think husband. The police.
Is the husband or the boyfriend?
The police I got in any fact is a 45-year-old man who was sleeping and having sex with the 11-year-old stepdaughter, and the mother is 40. Guys, that's one of the. Leslie, you caused me skip over the cabinet shuffle, but that's fine. Let's go to that. We'll come back if we have time, but let's go to that. Let's go to the fact that they were charged. In fact, several charges.
I was so happy.
Yeah,
and you're talking about charge and what's not, right?
Yes.
And again, we're talking about how gullible we are as a people, and I say we as Bahamian people.
Yes.
Some of the things that are taking place in our communities requires a greater level of accountability. One time ago, when something happened, the whole you not wanting the community to know you being involved in a certain behavior was once one of the ways that we policed our communities. But because the snitch culture came in where I ain't got nothing to say, it ain't my business, it ain't reached my doorstep, so that ain't getting that. Even let's go back to little baby Bella. And the news, news interview where I think the neighbor or some adjacent person said, I saw something, I didn't know something was wrong. But who did she hold accountable?
Nobody.
And so we got to get back to a place of accountability, that village concept, understanding that I am because we are. And we've lost that way. And until we get back there, and raise our level of accountability, like these kinds of incidents are gonna continue to occur.
Not only accountability, love for each other, concern for each other, for the welfare of each other, especially our children.
It's almost like, Shenique, the average young woman walking home, young girl. I'm doing a mapping exercise in one of our communities right now, where in these communities, young girls traversing to and from school, going to and from school, walking through the shortcuts. And Mr. Miller, as you talked about beautification, we need to do a greater job at cleaning up our communities, because when these young girls walk through the shortcut, understanding that these things are traditional to us, walking through the shortcut to get home and what's not, we got to find ways again as a community to restore the level of accountability that we once had.
Restoration behind.
Man, look here, I grew up in Inagua, and if I get beaten by Miss Julie got to tell me fix my clothes when I walk out that schoolyard, and mother hear about that when I reach home, I am problem. Plus, when I got deal with Miss Julie, I got deal with my Grammy, and I got deal with my mommy. We've lost that. Teachers now tell me today, when the average teacher calls to make a case to a parent about their experience with a child,
they get beat up.
And they get beat up.
They get beat up. And you're right, more than likely they will be attacked. They better not physically discipline.
By the babies who having babies.
Exactly. They better not be physically discipline any children, because Shaquan them come in to approach the teacher, and that could end up into anything. And so nowadays, teachers aren't even empowered anymore to discipline students. That has to happen from the senior master and that level, and that's if they even discipline.
The police need to be commended.
But let's go back to this.
As swiftly as they did. To bring these people to court. That just happened last week.
On the 12th of this month, which was a Saturday, the mother and the 11-year-old girl walked into CDU, and with the fetus, and they presented. That part I'm not quite sure. And they presented the whole case, the whole everything to CID. And said, listen, this is what took place. The mother inserted some medication into the daughter to induce an abortion, and the following morning, the girl had expelled.
And within 6 months, this case is going to be dropped.
Shenique,
6 months.
Leslie.
I said it last week. I'm going to say it again. Because of financial reasons, someone's going to have a reason for the mother to drop those charges against that man. I've seen it happen in my lifetime over the last 30, 40 years. as a member of parliament, it will happen.
Shenique, we may not agree or like what Mr. Miller is saying, but based on what has been reported so far, it would appear as if such an attempt to cover up
You hear what I say?
this incident has already
Huh?
occurred.
Huh?
Where are we as a country with truly understanding how our moral fiber is eroding right at our right before our eyes? And you know what's so sickening about this whole ordeal? The average person is taking matters into their own hands.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And I don't care what the incident is. It's almost like the average person is taking matters into their own hands.
They have no faith in the system.
Exactly. And it ain't just faith in the police or faith in the social service or faith in education.
The system has failed them.
We have had a system collapse in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Yes.
And there's a need for us to revisit the tenets that uphold the country that
Well, then
we
where
once...
do we begin?
We
Where
gotta
do
go back
we
to the Bible.
start? Where do we start? Yes, we've got to go back to those things that once defined us,
Gotta do
those
it.
things that established communities
I'll
and
show you,
families,
for example,
that
Shenique.
families and communities were
Yes.
built on.
We are one.
Our foundation.
We are
We've
one.
moved away from it. You
Yes,
know
we
why?
have.
Because it's old school.
Yes.
It's old time.
Yes.
It is not modern. The modern thing is to go sit, relax, have fights on the internet, and that right there, that goes viral in a minute. And so viral is now the new thing. So if you ain't, everybody's lost in the internet in a reality
Go on.
that is a faux reality, and that's where they're lost, and that's the aspiration.
Mr. Miller, how many communities do you know that still have Sunday school inside them? I went into an inner city community just recently, and a little young boy came to me and said, I've been to church today. I said, you've been to Sunday school? He said, what that is?
Yeah.
Oh.
In the church.
It shows how much we've moved away from the very things that were essential and fundamental to our upbringing as a people. Unless we revisit these things, for those that are in the church then, unless we repair the altars like Elijah did, the fire of fall and any other fire we conjure up trying to say this is what we're going to do as a people, ain't gonna work. And so we must revisit the things that worked first, which is our God, our church.
Because they were never broken, and they're not broken. To
Unless
this
they're
day.
not broke, we have
broken.
lost our way with these things.
Yeah, they're not
Listen,
broken.
there's a
Yes,
site,
Nancy.
I was trying to find it just now, that's played on every day. I think it's say truth needs no defense. What have you? One of these sites always sent to my phone. I don't know how they'll get on my phone. They are now telling you that only a fool would believe in Jesus Christ. That only black people believe in the Bible. That was the white man's tale to us. That there is no God. And they're using curse words.
Wow.
Man,
to
Mr.
say
Miller,
what Jesus is.
I most believe that's an international
black
site.
people,
You think so?
It is. But black people are now falling for that very
Yes,
gimmick.
yes.
And that's
'Cause other sites are picking it up.
yeah, generally speaking, black people are falling for it
Yes.
and asking, who Jesus?
Yes.
What he done? What
Yes.
he do for me lately? And it's just a lot.
It frightens me.
No, it's a lot. They've
Frightens the hell
abandoned
out of
it. We have to wrap up, guys. I thank you both very much. And you're right. Again, this 11-year-old girl is going to need a whole lot of therapy and a whole lot of
The community
attention.
that she's in should need therapy.
Have to come.
That's right.
Have to come to her aid.
What about
so
the
that
other
she
little
goes
girls in
on
that
to live
community?
a good
Well, look
quality
at another
life.
one,
I thank you all
9
very
years
much.
old.
Millers, I thank you very much, both of you. Thank you so much, and I thank you.